Hello all, and welcome back to the Blind Horse Project podcast. For those of you just joining, the Blind Horse Project aims to bring awareness and education about our equine friends after they lose their eyesight. In many rescues across the USA, if a horse is brought in that is blind, they are immediately put down without thought of rehabilitation or being put back to work. Similarly, most equine boarding facilities, which is how the majority of people house their horses, do not accept blind horses for board. And oftentimes, when an owner's beloved horse goes blind, the first thing that they hear from the professionals and the people around them is often the recommendation to put their horse down. The Blind Horse Project aims to bring the happy, actual reality to light in the public eye, that our horses can far more easily adjust and thrive than we give them credit for. We argue that our horses do not need to be euthanized after they lose their eyesight, and that once adjusted, our blind horses can come back to work as family horses, as competition horses, and even as therapy horses. We argue this by bringing the little-known but large community of blind horse owners into the limelight and give them a platform to share their journeys with the world. This is the Blind Horse Project. And today we are joined by Project Ambassador Lynsie as she shares with us her journey with her completely blind horse, Marley.
All right, Lynsie. Well, thank you for joining us today on the Blind Horse Project podcast. Can you give us a little bit of backstory on yourself?
Well, my name is Lynsie Davis, and I live in a small town called Cottage Grove, Oregon, over here in the Pacific Northwest. And I'm, roughly 40 years old. My profession is a supervisor for a pizza parlor that's main goal is to give teenagers their first jobs and teach them how to join the working world. And I have a small farm out here in the country. We have 4 horses, chickens, geese, dogs, cats, pretty much you name it, we have it. And we love our small farm life out here in the country.
Cool. Yeah, that's definitely living the dream. For a lot of us anyways. Well, for some people it might not be because some people don't do livestock poop, but
yeah.
All right, so how did you come to own your blind horse?
So I found him in 2011 when I lived over in Central Oregon. And I had previously had horses, but in starting my family, I had decided that I just didn't have the time to keep them. So I ended up rehoming my last horse at, a few years into having children. And he ended up going to a good home. I had a friend that was a trainer that he rehomed him to a therapy home type of situation with kids with disabilities. So I knew he was going to a good place. And so after a few years, after my kids had grown a little bit, I decided I can't live without having a horse anymore and started searching for the right one. And during that time I was looking, I had test rode a horse and had a really bad accident on him. And I decided that I was just going to get an unbroke horse and start from scratch, that I wasn't going to inherit somebody else's problems again.
Okay.
And I just wanted to train a horse the way I wanted him to be trained. And I knew that, from the ground up that what to expect from the horse. So I had spent about a year looking for the right one. And I came across Marley, who happened to be a mile away from where I lived. I didn't know he was an Appaloosa at the time I went and looked at him, but it was like instant. Instantly I knew he was the one for me. I had previously had Appaloosas, circumstantially ended up with Appaloosas. So it wasn't a breed I wasn't unfamiliar with. And anyway, ended up taking him home. And I believe it was Easter weekend, I ended up taking him home in 2011.
So how did you end up realizing that he was blind? Did you know that he was blind when you purchased him, or was it something that just happened, or?
He didn't go blind for quite some time after I got him. As I said, he was, I got him in 2011. Probably about 5 years in, I noticed he couldn't see at night anymore. And that's a common occurrence with Appaloosas. They get night blindness. So I just kind of accommodated him at that time. He had his ways. He already knew what to do on his own. He'd always go park himself in the back of the field and what he considered a safe place to sleep. How I found out he was night blind was the mares that we had used him to break down the fence at night. They would coerce him over to the fence and then scare him so he would bulldoze the fence down and they could all get out. And so one night while he was running across the yard, he ran into one of our boats.
Ooh.
And so that's how I knew there was a problem developing. He couldn't see at night. And then it just, as the Appaloosas degrade over time, and he was great for a few years. We were just aware of the problem, and he could still see. He wasn't completely visually impaired for quite some time. And it wasn't until about 4 years ago that it just got so bad. He ran into a panel in broad daylight, and I ended up taking him to the vet to get him evaluated. And he had glaucoma in his left eye. And they said that he had a small lesion in his right eye, but there wasn't anything severely wrong with his right eye. And so the first thing we did there was schedule his removal for the eye that had the glaucoma in it.
Okay.
And because inevitably, there is treatments for it, but in the end, it's just inevitable that the eye is going to have to come out. It's just going to get to the point where it's causing too much pain. So I'm kind of a realist, and I'm like, I'd rather just get it done with than put him through a bunch of pain and suffering and trying to treat the eye when in the end, it's just going to come out. So we just skipped a bunch of trauma and moved on and got that eye removed.
Okay.
And then
what are some challenges that you had to overcome working with your blind horse that you didn't have previously?
So his personality has always been very high in stubbornness. He picks and chooses what he wants to do and what he wants to learn, what he wants to take in, what he wants to do to please you. And that just in itself was a challenge to try and train him just for basic riding. He would do good on a lot of things, and then he would bulk up and refuse to carry out on other things. So he did amazing when it came to desensitization. He did great there. He took very minimal effort to desensitize him, but when it came to saddling and moving from there, he just was like, I'm not doing this. I am not doing this. I don't like it. And you can't really make me go any further with this. So we spent a lot of time trying to just get him broke to the saddle, get him broken to the cinch. That was always what kind of just slowed us down and everything was his just, I'm not going to get over this. I know exactly what you want from me, but I don't care.
Yeah, you do run into that with the Appaloosa for sure. Honestly, as a trainer, when I get Appaloosas in, there's just kind of like the Appaloosa personality, if that makes sense. There's just no other breed of horse that has their type of quirks, if that makes sense.
Yep, exactly. And he had little sparks of my other Appaloosa, and I think that's what drew me to him. Is I saw those little sparks, those little bits of personality from my other two. So that's where I'm like, he's the one, he's the next one, however, he has made such a bigger difference in my life than the other two because of how far we've come and all of these challenges that he has set up for me. And it was in his blindness that we were able to actually start the writing process. I took parts of his personality that I had seen over the years. He loved kids. He loved animals. He was a people pleaser. It's just you didn't cross the line with that before he was ready for you to cross that line. And so one day I was just thinking about this. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to take the kids out and we're going to try and see how he handles the kids riding him around bareback, being led in a safe situation. And that's all it took. Like, he had no problems with the kids riding him. And it opened up a new world for him, so to speak. And after the kids rode him for a month or so bareback, we moved to the English saddle because it's not as traumatic as carrying around a big Western saddle. He was like perfectly accepting of the English saddle. And then after a little while with the English saddle, saddling up with the Western saddle, and he's like, this isn't a big deal.
And that's actually a really good strategy to use when a horse is having trouble with the saddle in their beginning training stages. The Western saddle is like I feel like it's so heavy and bulky, and like you can't put the stirrups up if the stirrups are bothering them at first. Like for some horses, it's just too much commotion on their back for stage one of learning how to carry things on their back.
Mm-hmm. So after that, he just started doing great. I had to take him back and forth for his appointments. Because after we had his first initial eye removed, we had to take him to a local vet here and have his stitches removed. And that vet examined his other eye that had the laceration. We can do treatment for this. So we did that for a while. And then at one of his checkup appointments to check the progress of that laceration, which was getting worse over the months of treatment. It was starting to spread in his eye. But at one of those appointments, while we were standing there, this pink tissue popped out from his bottom eyelid until that moment when it just slid over his eyeball and then sucked back down under his eyelid. If we weren't looking at the moment, would have never even known it was there. And so his vet took a biopsy of that tissue and it came back positive for squamous carcinoma.
Oh, okay. So do you think that was the problem from the start then?
Yes, in that eye. And they had tested his eyeball, but nothing really came back indicating that it was cancerous. So it wasn't until they took the tissue sample and that came up positive. And then there was discussion, it's time for the eye to come out. He suggested a cancer treatment but it was so hard to treat Marley, so much over the course of a year of just treating him, spraying him in the eye 3 times a day with all sorts of stuff. It was just, what? It's in the tissue. The whole eye needs to come out, and anything that you can get out of before it spreads to other parts of his body.
Yeah.
That's how he ended up losing his second eye. Which at that point, what was the laceration had spread to where he was only seeing light and dark. He couldn't see any shapes or anything at that time anymore.
Did he struggle getting to that point?
No, I think because it was such a gradual decline, he just had already been teaching himself how to function with his loss. So, he had already memorizing the property. I put stuff out here and there that is, he could locate. I put rocks on the ground so he can in the pasture, and then we have a bridge for practicing the horses riding over. And then he has a log at the far end. And when he goes out in the pasture, he locates one of those things to map out where he is and how he can get around. But I believe he was already doing that, unbeknownst to any of us. When he lost both eyes, he could still get around and function like all the other horses.
Okay, and did you keep him housed with other horses during that time?
Really noticeable part of his blindness, out in his pasture during the day with the other horses. And then I always bring him in at night to his barn, to his stall. He never liked being sheltered. He never liked to go into any outbuildings or anything prior to his blindness, but he just ended up accepting that this is better. Him going and being enclosed up at night because he knew he was safe. He didn't have to worry about anybody getting him. The mares, He's always been, low man. And so the girls would always pick on him. Like I said, they'd shoo him through the fence, so he would plow the fence down for him.
Yeah, that's so cool. I think it's important for our listeners to know how these horses are housed. Mostly because, like, there's so little information out there about having blind horses. Like, everybody, don't get me wrong, it's definitely an adjustment, but I do feel like the general horse population makes it out to be a bigger thing than it actually is.
His life changed for the better. He went to a really spooky Appaloosa to pretty much not being able to, or being afraid of anything because he can't see anything anymore.
And so it was a positive thing.
Yes, for him it was a positive thing. And now when we go out and ride, he's the lead horse. Whenever the group that we're riding with, generally there's always one green horse in the group. And he is the one that shows them there's nothing to be afraid of in the situation.
Mm-hmm.
We've gone past picnic tables with flapping tablecloths, kids on bikes, and he is just unfazed completely. He's the one that's crossing the water. He's doing all the things that other horses would have issue with, and he's showing them it's okay. You can do this.
Absolutely. Are there any special moments that you can share?
When I'm out doing stuff in the yard, when I'm working on projects, and this hasn't changed since his blindness, is whenever I'm doing something, he always locates me and he hangs out and just chills out with whatever I'm doing. He always bumps me or acknowledges that he's there.
Mm-hmm.
And
so it's just like a connection.
Yes. And my mom has, among other people that have seen, but my mom's always one that always stated it, that you guys have a bond. You guys were meant to be together. And if he was with anybody else, he probably would have been euthanized as soon as the first indication of blindness. He probably would have been euthanized long before that because of his stubbornness and refusal to be trained.
Yep, I know a few horses like that. They get to pick the people that they want to listen to, and that's just kind of what it is.
Yeah. And he has had a lot of moments where, you can see the wheels turning and then it's like it clicks. It took me a year to get this horse to load into the trailer I bought. Because he just refused it. He's like, I'm not getting in that metal box for you. I'm just not doing it. And I tried all the methods. I looked up videos, all over the internet, trying to figure out how to get different ways to get him in the horse trailer. And nothing worked. Like, he would wear me out before he wore out. And so I had to build a fake trailer out of pallets in baby steps. Start with the bottom, walk him over, get him used to the sound of his feet stepping on the wood. Then I had to build walls, walk him into that, walk him through it. And then I had to build a front on it so I could walk him in and back him out. And then I was just about to build a roof on it so it gave the enclosed space feeling. But I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go try the horse trailer with him and see what he does. As soon as we got over there, he immediately walked in the horse trailer and stood there.
That is really cool that you literally built a horse trailer for him to get over this issue. That's fantastic.
And just, he has to he forces me to figure out a way to make him understand what I'm asking. He is not the mainstream horse that all these methods will work on. He's like, I'm going to make you work harder.
Absolutely. And that's something that's kind of fun with horse training that I feel like a lot of these people that are trying to kind of promote a specific method, they kind of fall short on, because as soon as you make a genuine rule about horses, like, this is how you deal with this problem, right? The moment you try to fit that into a box, a horse will immediately come along that will show you that that doesn't work. And you have to go back to square one and learn.
And with everything, absolutely everything. And then I'll do something, you know, my husband, he used the Clinton Anderson method to train his Mustang.
Mm-hmm.
So we've had many nights where we've argued, like, that's not the only way to do it. And Marley is proof of that is not the only way to get through to a horse. And I can't remember where I was going with that.
That's okay. A lot of the more creative types of people tend to have more ADHD type thought patterns. So I know I am definitely one of those, and you will notice that within the podcasts that we release, that sometimes as I'm trying to keep the flow going of the podcast, it kind of skips a beat while my brain moves a little bit faster than my mouth can keep up with.
Yeah, it's totally me.
Okay, so what are your future plans with your blind horse?
Well, as I was going on with the horse trailer, getting him into the horse trailer, once he discovered that we're not just going to I'm going to guess, I'm going to theorize here that his refusal to get into trailer was based upon the fact that he didn't know where he was going.
Mm-hmm.
Every previous situation before me, he, anytime he got loaded in a horse trailer, he was going to an completely new place that was unfamiliar with new people. And, I don't know for sure, but I was told that he was initially rescued from being a neglected case with a bunch of horses living on 100 acres. And all the horses were feral, and they rounded him up. So, I believe his first initial trailering was probably pretty traumatized, being loaded up with a bunch of horses and hauled to a new place. And then, as a horse that was untouched for who knows how long, got thrown into trying to be saddle braked and adopted out. And then adopted out again. I believe that was the initial fear of him refusing to get into the trailer. And so when we finally started going places, started going trail riding, and then loading up into the trailer and going home, it created a pattern with him. And then him losing his blindness, now he is excited to go in the trailer, and we go trail riding. And we go to new places and explore. And like our local horse park now, he has the whole park mapped out. And he knows when we're heading back to the trailer, he starts slowing down, and when we get to the main area where I generally get off and walk into the parking lot, he's like, no, I am not ready to go. I'm not ready to go home. I was not done with this trail ride. And so this is now how he experiences the world. He's not a big fan of just dawdling around at home anymore. He hears me hook up the trailer, and he perks up, and he will do whatever he can to prepare himself to go for a ride.
That is so cool. And honestly, I think that you're right on that. Our horses are so much smarter than we give them credit for, like so much smarter. And I think that's a big part of the reason that the general perspective of blind horses is the way that it is because in general, we just don't give our horses enough credit for their intelligence.
Exactly. And, everybody forgets. When we go in group trail rides, everybody forgets he can't see. People that are just passing by, they don't notice that he doesn't have any eyes anymore. And until they actually stop and pet him and get a good look. And they're just blown away that I'm out there, doing stuff with him. You know, he's climbing logs, he's climbing hills, he's doing water crossings, and he's totally unfazed by anything. And one of the things that ended up being for the better for him was he had a severe fear of other people riding horses. Mm-hmm. And this was something I could not get him over. You know, my husband, my kids would ride the other horses around him, and he would just explode. He would bolt. He would, you know, I always had, before he lost his sight, I had to be prepared for him to just take off with me because of the fear. And we did all the exercises. We did the, you know, working slowly, getting closer with the other horses, him going up. But he'd get close. He'd inspect them. He'd get pets. He'd get treats. But if the horse moved, he'd lose his mind. And I could not really find any help other than just the general, like little bits here, little bits there, until something changes. After he lost his sight, since he doesn't see them, he has no idea that people are riding horses around him.
It's just really interesting how his life has changed for the better with it. I think that's really, really inspiring to hear. But is there anything else before we wrap up here that you'd like the listeners to know? Anything that you'd want to tell, like somebody who's brand new coming in and they've just learned that their horse is going blind, that type of a thing?
Yes. You know, I handled his blindness worse than he probably did. I was the one who was struggling with accepting that our life is changing. And really, it didn't. You know, he still knows what he's doing. He doesn't know any better than what has happened to him. And he is adjusted perfectly fine to his new lifestyle. You know, I do little, you know, really I don't do much different than when he was sighted or when I'm around the other sighted horses. The only thing I really do is I have a little speaker I carry on my belt, and I play music when I'm out and around him. That way he knows where I am. I have taught him voice cues, but he is such a stubborn butt that he is just like, today I'm not listening to you. And so heading towards the barn wall instead of the barn door, I'm like, stop. I know you know, stop. And he just he'll turn his ears at me. I know he's listening, but he's like, I don't care. And he'll smack right into the wall. And it's always, you know, should have listened to me, Marley. He's like, yeah, probably.
Yep. And that's really funny because, like, so, I do think that it would be interesting if more people understood that when horses go blind, it's not uncommon for them to go, I don't need a seeing eye, human. Are you kidding me? I know what I'm doing. Get out of the way, human. I do know that, like, for instance, a funny story was I was actually doing a blind horse horsemanship demo at the Washington County Fair. And Blink and I had kind of just started to canter bridleless. And one of the moments there that was kind of funny, it sticks in my mind because it was, of course, in front of a crowd of people. He decided that he was just going to canter, and we almost ran into a wall because he was so sure that he knew where he was going and he was going to go that route. By the way, he's an Appaloosa, just like Marley. They're the cats of the horse world, I think.
Yeah, for sure. But, you know, I have just that, you know, after my experience with Marley, I don't want to go back to a sighted horse. You know, I think this is my destiny, so to speak, is to just continue to have blind horse. And, you know, my daughter, she wanted a horse a few years ago, and we came across this blind baby on Craigslist for sale. And she saw pictures, and she's like, I'm in love with him. And I'm like, all right, well, let's go look at him. And he was an adorable little 9-month-old colt. And he was born blind. He had one deformed eye and he has cataract on the other eye. And he has for 10 to 25% vision. And he has packed full of personality. He has Appaloosa, he has paint, he has Frisian, just a Heinz 57 of a horse. And he is just amazing. He is something else. And, me and my daughter talked about it. It's going to take a lot to train a blind horse that was born this way, not one that degrades into it. And she's like, well, I'm up for the challenge. And this boy has been such a breeze to work with because he doesn't know any different. He is born this way and he is just living life. He has no idea he has a disability at all.
Yep, that makes sense. I've seen a lot of horses that are born blind. Like, it's a completely different ball game for them. When they're born blind and they've never had sight, they don't have to adjust to it. So, like, I've personally seen blind horses that are born blind, like, canter and gallop in pastures that are, like, full of, like, logs and hills and valleys and all this other stuff. And they do just fine.
Yep. Yep, that's what I have to say. If you have any hesitation about getting a blind horse or you're worried about them going blind, don't worry about it. They will change your world and change your life and show you amazing things.
I think that is a beautiful and inspiring note to end on. Thank you so much for being on the podcast with us, and thank you so much for being part of the Blind Horse Project.
Definitely. Thank you for having me.
Of course. Have a great day, Lynsie.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Project Ambassador Lynsie, for sharing your beautiful journey with Marley with us. And thanks to our listeners for tuning in. For more information on the Blind Horse Project, feel free to take a look at our other socials under the Blind Horse Project. This includes TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. And if you would like to submit your journey for the podcast or a video highlight, or if you are interested in joining the Ambassador Program, please email us at theblindhorseproject@aol.com. Thanks, everyone.